little things, little visions of the future they have. Because we don't want the vision that they've got. Their vision is this complete smart takeover. Even in Australia, that's what they're talking about with the floods now, the fact that they've flooded everybody out, which is complete weather wars, folks. The whole thing is weather wars. I've shown you so many times that Australian company, Acquiesce, that says they can control the weather. And they do it electromagnetically. They've said they do it electromagnetically. There's a whole bunch of disinformation out there about weather control as well and geoengineering. There's a whole bunch of distraction that is out there hiding the real story of what's going on with the weather. I mean, all the weather's controlled, folks. All of it is controlled right across the earth. And it's been controlled for over 100 years. There was a really good YouTube channel, it's actually still there I think, called Weather War 101. It was run by a woman who is a networker. She helped put the internet together basically. I mean she was working out computer networks and routing problems and stuff when it was in its infancy. There was no path to follow. She's one of the people who created the paths that people follow now. So it was completely trailblazing stuff. Very, very intelligent woman. And then one day she started paying her attention to the weather. She started looking, she saw something on TV. She saw a weather map, a weather report, and she saw definitive overlapping circles in the weather map. And she thought, why isn't the weatherman noticing this? And then the more she looked at weather maps, the more she saw these sorts of things. And so she stopped doing what she was doing. She started concentrating on the weather, and she figured out that all the weather is controlled.
For me, it started 20 years ago. I had already been aware of the increase in bizarre and inexplicable weather events for some time, but just like everybody else, I didn't have any idea how it was happening. It was perfectly clear to me that it wasn't natural, however, and it really began to get me. One day I was watching the news and the weather report came on. The weather radar showed 2 overlapping rings plain as day, and when the storm system passed the intersecting rings, the storm completely changed. The weatherman just acted like he couldn't see it, and it was just infuriating. It was at that point I decided I wanted to know what I was looking at. Up until that point, I had spent my adult life as a corporate network engineer, and I was extremely good at it. For decades, I designed and built wide area networks for corporations all over the country and was highly sought after. Engineering and scientific thinking in general is in my blood, and from the time I was a child, knowing how things worked was my imperative. It didn't matter what the object was. If I didn't understand how something functioned, I made sure I figured it out. This inherent ability was essential throughout my career, as the early days of networking were essentially the Wild West. It was all groundbreaking work, so encountering systems, reverse engineering how they put together, and figuring out how to get disparate systems to communicate with new PC networks became second nature. So after seeing those 2 rings that I didn't understand and the weatherman's frustrating obliviousness, I set my sights on the weather. Figuring out what those rings were was the first step, which began my research and understanding of the NEXRAD Doppler grid.
So what was the next thing you discovered about these rings? And are they the harp rings of Dutch sense?
The first thing I determined was that the rings were all overlapping, but they were all individual. It was clear that each ring had a center, and thus whatever was in the center had to be generating the ring. It's almost surprising that it took me as long as it did, since by watching TV weather radar I was already looking at the source, but eventually I came across a layout of the 156 NEXRAD Doppler weather radar stations across the country, and it hit me like a flash of light. At the center of each of these rings was a NEXRAD station, and the locations of the rings matched up exactly. I found all of the necessary NEXRAD specifications to prove they were capable of doing exactly what I say they are doing, and that can be visibly observed every single day. Each NEXRAD pulse is 750,000 watts. There are 156 of them across the country and they all overlap. This is the horrendous frequency blanket we all live in.
She tried to get the information out to people, but nobody was interested, and she seems to have disappeared. The last report that I can find of her, I think, was around about 2014, possibly 2016, but I think 2014. The website, Weather War 101, is now gone. There is a WordPress replacement site that's there, run by a guy. You can see his email there. Somewhere on the site you can find his email, but it's run by a guy, it's not run by her. And I don't know what her name is. I'd be very interested to find out if this woman is still alive and how I could get in contact with her if she is, or anybody who might know her or anything of her. If you give me some information about it, because she had some compelling information. She approached a lot of people. She approached all of the people, all of the truthers in the truth community, because when she discovered this, she thought, well, this is going to blow the lid off everything. And this is really important information, and it explains how the weather is controlled, and it shows it's demonstrable. You can look at this and you can see it every day. It's right there. You can see it with your own eyes. But nobody would listen to her. Everyone was following this whole concept of HAARP and everything like that. And HAARP is an interesting thing. And even